everybody. It's Monday, March 15th, and that means it's time for another episode of Chatting with Agnes and Cecilia, Nonprofit Conversations, brought to you by Rogue Tulips Nonprofit Consulting and Association Management Services. I'm Cecilia Sepp. I'm one of your co-hosts, and I'm here today with my co-host and friend, Agnes. I'm going to throw it over to Agnes so she can introduce herself.
Thank you, Cecilia. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our global audience, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Agnes Amos Coleman. I'm an author and a consultant. Over to you, Cecilia.
Great. Thank you, Agnes. And we are really excited today to have as our guest Bryant Richards, and he is going to talk with us today about intelligent process automation and organizational success, which is one of his passions. Welcome, Bryant. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Cecilia. Appreciate it. And Agnes, hello, and thanks for having me in the class on this session. My name is Bryant Richards. I am an associate professor of accounting and finance at Nichols College in Dudley, Massachusetts, a small specialty business school right outside of Worcester, Massachusetts. It's pretty good at professional preparedness as well as skills training for the folks going into industry. I am also the director of the Center of Intelligent Process Automation, the head of a new initiative we have at Nichols College, focused on accessibility and participation in what is becoming, frankly, the new way that work will be done.
So that's a great launching point for our conversation today, Bryant. So what is the new way that work is being done? Because some of us are too close to it to see the big picture.
Sure. So, it seems like this trend has started maybe 20 years ago. And I'm going to tell you that over the last 5 years or so, what's happened is all this technology that existed got really cheap, got really well packaged together, and was really easy to use, comparably so. And what it's doing is it's taking anything that is a digitized process. A friend and a colleague of mine, Kieran Gilmurray, says the clickety click. Any clicks that we do or somebody can do can now be recorded, and you can give that to a bot or a piece of code that sits on a server or something to do that for you. And it can follow a lot of very complex instructions and do it repeatedly for you. And it can work at any time to do it, and it's always available. And frankly, they tend to be a lot faster than people in doing certain things, and they make less mistakes.
Well, that's interesting. So what sort of things might a nonprofit organization apply that to?
Oh, sure. So the fun thing about, I would say, nonprofits is there's often lots of processes that involve paperwork, that involve reporting, that involve either checking or moving data in different ways. And you'll find that all of these processes, as long as they're repeatable, again, even if there's some decisions to be made on how you repeat it, can all be automated. And I think you'll find that nonprofits are a great place to add some small automation, which would free up what I see as a lot of folks wearing a lot of different hats. Maybe they could wear a few less hats and focus a little bit more.
Exactly. Cecilia, I think that's a great thought process, actually. And when you mentioned the word automation, I do agree that word has been around for over 20 years now. And I remember even up till today, the biggest concern that the association world or the association community has is, if we automate our process, does that mean that we're out of a job? And what is it that you can share with our global audience as far as automation is concerned, that automation is not about losing your job, it's actually about enhancing what you do. And to your point, it actually makes your job a lot easier so that you can focus on what really matters. So can you share your thought process on that?
I can, but I'm not sure. I want to sort of just be candid too. And one of the reasons that I'm passionate about this is because in the near term, one of my concerns, as you'll see, is about accessibility and participation. And those are nice words, but there's a lot of studies that show a significant amount of people could be displaced or not participating in this economy. So I want to sort of start with that, because when you automate something, now I'm an accountant by trade. Well, 70% of the things I did for the first 5 years of my career don't need to be done. right? So there's some simple math there that would make a logical person say, well, wait a minute, what's going to happen to my job? And I want to tell you that in a short term, I think it's really important that folks like us in the educational community come out and say, let us give you the skills you need to participate in this very important and exciting opportunity for the world, frankly, right? So there's that. In terms of what I've seen a lot of very responsible organizations deploy a lot of automations with the focus of ensuring their employees that they're still going to have jobs.
Okay.
There's a lot of statistics that are coming out with these organizations who are being very responsible, and I say responsible because I think they're being strategically smart, which we think sounds nice, but I think for these automation projects to actually be successful, I don't think an organization can come off and just tell everybody, hey, go automate everything and then you're all out of a job, right? They understand that that's not a smart thing to do for long-term success of the business. So responsible, strategic, however you want to see it. With that being said, the studies coming out of the companies who are leading in this space, the employees are so excited. The employees are hitting higher marks in terms of engagement, in terms of automation, in terms of opportunities, innovation and collaboration. I've seen, much higher in organizations, and I think this is logical, because if you think of your organization right now, and if you think of just innovation and collaboration, well, if I think of the nonprofit space, which I live in right now with all my hats, and I work with some other nonprofits, it's really hard to be innovative and collaborative when you're so busy clicking and moving data and focusing on sort of tedious manual tasks that really take a lot of your energy and really aren't the highest of value. So I think if you just take that analogy and you go into, your nonprofits or something and say, okay, what if we were to just take that away? What's possible for us? And I think it takes a really long time to sort of get to the point where you need to start eliminating jobs. I think you're just so eager to deploy those resources to higher value things. How many times you've said maybe, what could we do here if we just had the time to focus on it, type of thing. And that's the trend we're seeing in industry in a lot of ways.
So now, basically repositioning people into different kind of jobs. Is that what
absolutely? Sure, or even just focusing differently. Again, I think the nonprofit space, and I feel like there's, everywhere you go, there's people who wear 5 hats. Well, what if you could just be really good at 2 of them, or 5, or 4 of them even? There's people listening to this probably right now saying, "Oh my God, what I wouldn't give to wear 3 hats," right? And I think if we could just, I like your word, reposition. I think that would be important. In larger companies, I think there's different challenges and different resources, because I think the repositioning, might actually move people more into different departments that require different skills, which is, again, something we're kind of focused on at the Center of Intelligent and Process Automation.
And how does artificial intelligence play into this, if at all?
Sure. So I love quoting Kieran Gilmurray, who's really up on this stuff and has been in it for quite a few years. And he says, robotic process automation is the clickety click, and he says the AI is the thinkety think. So you just kind of, and it sticks with you. You're going to be saying this months from now. You're going to be the clickety click and the thinkety think, right?
I love it. Yes.
And
get down.
and I see this maybe too simply, but robotic process automation really ties everything together in a digital world. You start connecting all of these things, and once you've connected this, one of the powerful things about robotic process automation is it actually creates data sets. You have access to more data, different types of data than you had before. Once you have that in a really positive way, and you've sort of freed up your organization to be more thoughtful and more strategic and less clickety click and sort of manual, you now have the opportunity to ask some really interesting questions. What is better for my customers or my stakeholders? Where should we focus? Let's look outside of our organization and let's really explore some of these things. Well, artificial intelligence, I believe, complements that type of process. It starts taking your data and it starts saying, well, how do we identify better patterns? How do we learn faster in the future than we could with just our own minds by taking all this data and processing it very quickly.
Well, Agnes, did you have a comment or question?
You know, the comment that kind of comes to my mind right now is the role of the stakeholder in really managing the strategically. And I think you touched on it to some point. That means that the stakeholder, when I say the stakeholder, I'm looking at the board in the nonprofit world, of course, in really communicating this strategic approach, if this is approach that they want to take, to help kind of, you know, work within the organization, within the association to educate. So again, that leads me back to education, role of the stakeholder, the board of directors, the executive director, and the role of education that it plays in really communicating what this process involves, what are some of the risks that's involved, is it the risk of losing your job, is it the risk of repositioning, you know, just really educating your staff that there are some really positive elements here that we really need to focus on, but that needs to come from the stakeholders. They really need to, there needs to be a significant role from the leadership of the organization in making this work.
Yeah, if I could comment on that, I mean, I mean, Agnes, this is tying exactly to what we're seeing in industry too. One of the things that happened even pre-COVID was this was a big topic on the large company boards, like all the for-profits and the, you know, the big companies especially. You know, this was a board topic. With COVID, it was a board imperative in a lot of ways for a lot of, you know, obvious reasons, I think. On the nonprofit side, I'm not seeing it necessarily get there as much. I'm not seeing as much data where it's being talked about. And I think, you know, as I talk about why we're launching a center, is I think what we're seeing is these large organizations are really, I mean, they get on this path, they get on their journey, and they're, you know, they're just jumping through the, you know, the roof with all of their performance, and they're doing great and whatnot. My concern is if the nonprofits aren't aware of their opportunity in the smaller organizations, there's going to be an opportunity to be left behind. And if I were to deliver a message to, you know, the folks listening now, I'd say that I agree with what you just said, Agnes. Please, everybody, listen to what Agnes just said. But just understand too that when you talk about automation, you might be thinking of millions of dollars that you have to invest in, that you're just not in the ball game with this stuff, and that's not true at all. I mean, we're talking $50,000, $60,000 implementations, and I know that's a lot of money for folks, but you know, the ROIs on these types of projects are very easy to determine before you get involved with them, and whether it suits you or not. And there are risks, but there's a lot of work that's been done already to kind of help people, you know, get up that learning curve and think through how this works for them.
Well, that's a great point, Bryant, and I concur. You should always listen to Agnes. I try to as well. So we have a couple minutes left, and one of the things that I see as a concern for nonprofit organizations is the bright, shiny thing, the thing they chase. It's like, oh, if we just get a new AMS, all of our problems will be solved. If we add on this system, all of our problems will be solved. What are some of the pitfalls that people need to avoid when automating, and what are some of the questions that they need to ask? Like, what are 2 or 3 questions you need to start with before you start automating?
Yeah, wow. So I like that question, and I'm trying to think of which ways to answer that. It's easy to start with really understanding your process.
Okay.
And so when, you know, any organization that has yet to truly understand its processes or doesn't have a good understanding of its processes, I'll tell you that, you know, you've got challenges to overcome with just that, right? You never want to automate a process that isn't effective. I once heard something that you don't improve your problems, you tend to magnify them, right? So, you know, this is a process discipline first, and automation is just a possible solution. So I think if anybody went out and said, oh, I have to go do robotic process automation, and then because it's a shiny thing and it sounds important, I mean, we could help you, or folks can help you kind of understand how it might work for you. But I would say it really comes down to, you know, what problems are you trying to solve, and what understanding do you have about your process first? So that's number one. The pitfalls that come out are folks that buy the shiny thing, and don't do the sort of the pre-work up front. Make better processes, understand their processes. Just try to plug something in and run with it. And I can assure you that there's organizations who have some remorse for picking up this shiny thing, but not really understanding how it works for them.
Right.
And then there's always, with any sort of IT solution, there's always sort of this cultural change type of thing. Are you being strategic? Are you communicating with your employees? This I like to talk about, and it's not my words, but automation journey. This is a journey. You're exploring your processes, you're figuring out how automation works for you and your stakeholders, and you take steps and you move forward. And the organizations that tend to do that as a journey, become very successful because they learn from it, they build from it, they grow from it, and they get returns from it. And I think having that humility about that from an organizational standpoint is really critical to being successul.
That's great. And it is unfortunately time for us to wrap up already. I think that's a great point to close on, to be considerate of what you're trying to accomplish before you start implementing things. So Agnes, closing thoughts, comments?
I think Bryant has really shared some thought process with our global audience that we really need to come back and explore further, because I see the benefit here for our association community to really, have a deeper dive into this process, because if they have an understanding of what the opportunities are, there will be a willingness to embrace it as a strategy for the future. So we would definitely like Bryant to come back and break the science down for us, as it were, and help us in the community to start to look at ways that we can educate our community, start look at ways that we can automate responsibly.
Yeah, I agree. We definitely need to have Bryant back, and I have an idea of another guest that can join us with Bryant in the future.
Awesome.
So Bryant, if somebody would like to contact you to learn more about the center, what's the best way to do that?
Sure. I encourage everyone to please, you can find me on LinkedIn. By all means, I'm open to connecting, and that's one easy way. You can also send me an email at Bryant, Bryant.Richards at Nichols, NICHOLS.edu.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Bryant, for joining us today, and we are already looking forward to having you back. We have to go rogue for now, but we'll be back next week with another episode. If you'd like to learn more about Rogue Tulips Nonprofit Consulting, you can check us out online at roguetulips.com. We're also a huge supporter of the 501c League, which is a virtual membership group for everyone in the nonprofit community and the people who love them. The League is a leader in CAE development. You can check them out at the 501cleague.net. So until next time, on behalf of myself and Agnes and Bryant, thanks for joining, thanks for listening, and take 15 minutes and talk to somebody, as Agnes and I like to say, because you might learn something. So bye for now, and we'll be back next time.
Take care. Thanks, Brian.